Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast for the last time of today. Of course, the show is presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Again, back here for the final segment of the show. Moves that the teams in the AFC need to make, that just made the playoffs, need to make to either go further in the playoffs or conference championship contention, potentially Super Bowl for some of these teams that were very close last season, and they just fell a little bit short. So, diving straight into it, I'm going to talk about the Ravens first. I'm not going to talk about the Chiefs, obviously, just because they won the whole thing. They made it to the mountaintop, so I'll talk about the other 6 teams that were in contention. Starting with the Baltimore Ravens, the team that the Chiefs played in the AFC Championship. They have some offseason cleaning that they got to do. They don't have a lot of cap space, $600,000 in cap space according to ESPN. They have 8 picks in this coming draft, a lot of free agents to decide on, a lot of starters, pivotal starters from both sides of the ball. Patrick Queen, Kevin Zeitler, Gus Edwards, Geno Stone, Odell Beckham Jr., all those guys were starters basically, played prominent roles. Even if a guy like, Odell didn't get a lot of numbers, a lot of targets, didn't put up wide receiver 1 kind of numbers, he was still a bigger piece than people think of just because of the situations that the Ravens have had with wide receivers. He's one of the better ones that they've had, quite honestly, there in the time that Lamar Jackson's been there. But the biggest one for me is Patrick Queen. He's only going to be 25, 26 when next season's over. And he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. And to me, that's the biggest piece to try and re-sign for them. Kevin Zeitler is the other one I would say, just because he was a starter. And, he is getting up there in age, but I think really those old linemen can kind of play. You can kind of extend them just a little bit further in terms of age and what's considered too old to play the position. I think for O-line, those guys, you could at least give Kevin Zeitler 1 more year if you don't want to invest through the draft that way, because you have a late round pick anyway, and you might want to address other numbers if some other guys walk, or try and do something in free agency. There's been a lot of rumors around Derrick Henry, potentially Saquon Barkley to add to that running game. If they lose a guy like Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins is also a free agent that I didn't mention. If they lose both of those guys, and, unfortunately for J.K. Dobbins, he's been injured most of his time with the Ravens, and in just my way of thinking, I wouldn't be surprised if they let him walk, if they let him go to free agency. But Gus Edwards had a more important role this past season, but he wasn't an exciting, electrifying running back like Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley show out on the field. But they have been rumored to go to the Ravens, as well as other teams that I have on this list are. But that's one way they could go. But in the end, after all those scenarios, questions, that possibilities that the Ravens could do, my final prediction on them, one thing they absolutely have to do is, just going back to those free agents, making sure you get those eggs all counted up, aligned, get your ducks aligned, for another metaphor if you want to use that one. Get those guys signed, or at least the ones that you believe aren't interchangeable. You're not going to find another, in my opinion, a Patrick Queen that lines up so perfectly with Roquan Smith. Those 2 guys really only competing with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, in my opinion, for best linebacker tandem. And you saw how important that was in the playoffs to get a running mate for Roquan Smith, who has really become that Ray Lewis personality, character, leader for that defense. To have someone maybe a little bit lower, just in skill level talent, but they're right there with competing with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, and they have been so pivotal for them. You can't lose a guy like that, for me, in my opinion. And for them, I think they have to focus in on getting those guys back that got them to the AFC Championship, as many as they can, before they start thinking about who else can we add, who else would make us better, really jumping the gun before they get their old reliable players back. That's the Ravens. The next team I want to talk about are the Bills. And the consensus that I've gotten from the rest of just articles that I've read, things that I've seen on TV, is that the Bills could be in for a period where they could get a little bit less talented. They could lose a lot of guys that have been prominent players for them this past season and just seasons in the past. Really, during this time that, if you want to call it their Super Bowl window, they could lose some of those guys. And I'm sure everyone's seen the discussions that are being had. How long do the Bills have before this Super window is closed immediately? And I'm not of the group that thinks, it's this year and then that's it. It's over. I think as long as they have Josh Allen, quite honestly, they could certainly compete in that division because the quarterbacks in there aren't the top of the league caliber guys. The best one, if you want to say, could be Aaron Rodgers, but he is older and he's coming off a ruptured Achilles. How mobile, how dynamic is he going to be? And then the other one's Tua, but is he even going to be with the Dolphins past this next season? I think there's no doubt with the Bills that Josh Allen's going to be there, so I think as long as they have him, they'll have a chance. But they will lose potentially guys like Micah Hyde, their starting safety, Daquan Jones, Leonard Floyd, Dane Jackson are some of the free agents that they could lose. AJ Epinesa as well. Josh Allen does give you that talent, that chance, but the rest of these guys, like I'm sure every other successful team has, these other guys, make it more whole, more united. It fits everything perfectly like a puzzle if you have all this supporting staff, a great defense to rely upon sometimes if offensively you don't want to throw it all on Josh Allen to carry you there. They've had that kind of defense, but now you don't know where it's going to stand if they lose a locker room guy, a leader like Micah Hyde, a pass rusher like Leonard Floyd, a corner like Dane Jackson. I know you have Tre'Davious White coming back, but other than that, it's not looking too hot for their corners. So there's a lot of ifs, maybes, and potentials that could happen with them. But for me, with all that being said, the one thing that I would get into the mindset of thinking if I'm the Bills, one thing that they have to do is kind of strengthen or retool their offense to kind of be more of a running offense than a gunslinging offense, high-scoring one that's kind of pushed now with the NFL. In my opinion, I think they have a really exciting tight end pairing. Dawson Knox is a little bit older, but Dalton Kincaid really showed out this year, and I think Josh Allen built a great relationship with him, went to him in some crucial moments. I think that trust is only going to grow. And I know there's trade rumors with Stephon Diggs, but I don't really see him going anywhere. So if you have those two, Gabe Davis is also an unrestricted free agent, and he could walk. But as long as you have Stephon Diggs, I believe maybe draft another receiver or sign one that's cheaper through free agency. And you have those two tight ends and really build your offense through the run with James Cook, because I think he showed his level, or he took his level to another dimension this season. If you kind of retool that offense to run, Josh showed to be a great runner this past season as well. If you retool that offense, kind of change its style, its identity to really running teams into the ground, running through that O-line, option plays, just quick throws to Diggs, to the tight ends, really make it so Josh doesn't have to hold the ball too long, extend too many plays, and potentially throw an interception, make errors. That's also another thing that's been connected to Josh Allen his whole career. He makes too many mistakes. He tries to be the hero too many times, and it costs them. I think trying to retool their offense to this sort of style will significantly drop that, and you still get to enjoy Josh Allen being a runner, still using his arm if he's not throwing as often, not trying to make a big play. That's the Bills. And now I want to talk about the Texans. And how much better could it get for the Texans? They were lucky enough to find their quarterback for the next probably 10 years in C.J. Stroud. But they have a bit more cap space, $61.9 million. They're picking number 23 in the first round, and they have 8 picks overall. And they don't have too many big free agents. Jonathan Grenard and Dalton Schultz, Steven Nelson are the biggest ones I identified. But other than that, it's not too many guys that you wouldn't mind losing or that you couldn't retool, get younger at those positions through the draft. And Jonathan Grenard is eligible for the franchise tag, and I think they'll ultimately tag him because, pass rushers, like I mentioned in the segment before, if you didn't catch it, are in that 24 to 27 range, and I just think they would rather spend that in the move that I believe that they should make in trying to get a guy like Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley. I would love that move for the Texans, especially because Devin Singletary is also a free agent, and if you go all in on a Derrick Henry, a Saquon Barkley, you can let him walk. Yeah, you might pay one of these guys a little bit more, but if you tag Grenard, push his negotiations off a little bit, you can work with some money that a Saquon, a Derrick Henry would require. And it's not too much because the running back market is not the best. If I was a running back, the running back market would be awful for me because it's very undervalued. A lot of teams don't think they deserve a lot of money. So it's not going to be too much, too crazy to get him for maybe a year or two if it's Derrick Henry, or maybe a little bit longer, 3 or 4 years if it's Saquon Barkley, if you really think he could be that kind of player for them, which I believe he can be. And that's the kind of direction I want them to go, really go all in and helping C.J. Stroud, this exciting young Texans team, to be even more special with Tank Dell, Nico Collins. If they re-sign Dalton Schultz, now they get an exciting running back that could do so much for their offense besides just running it in the pass game. It'll be really exciting for the Texans if they go this route, and I think it'll really elevate them to pushing the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Ravens in those bigger games in the playoffs. But the second to last team would be the Browns. Not too much here in free agency-wise. They could rework Chubb's contract to get him to pay less and free up some more cap space, but the route I kind of want them to go is pretty simple, just because they don't have a lot of factors, is to try and find another playmaker that would pair up with Amari Cooper in the offense, whether it be a wide receiver or running back, because Kareem Hunt is also going to be a free agent, but mostly I'm hoping that they get a wide receiver because Amari Cooper is still a top 12, definitely, wide receiver. If you want to put him top 10, I wouldn't argue that in this league. I just think they're missing that option for Deshaun Watson when he comes back, to stop looking at Amari Cooper so much. If he's being double-teamed and triple-teamed and making mistakes, if they get somebody else that's maybe proven through free agency or an exciting young player through the draft, it'll definitely help them because their defense played lights out this past season. They don't really have to worry too much about them. It's just complementing them now with offense and getting the best out of Deshaun Watson because you're paying him a lot of money to be their franchise quarterback. So that's the direction I believe they could go. And finally, for the Steelers, it's ugly for them. They don't have many free agents to try to re-sign. It's really just about, for them, finding the guy that can compete with Kenny Pickett. Which quarterback in free agency do you think could be that guy? Or Russell Wilson, or Kirk Cousins, trading for Justin Fields? If it's not one of them, I think they have to get someone to compete with Kenny Pickett through the draft. Just kind of tug at the idea for Kenny Pickett, like, oh, my job is not safe. Just make him think that for a second, because I think it'll not only motivate Kenny Pickett to play a little bit better if he has that competition, it'll work out better for the Steelers because in the end, if the competition doesn't work out and you realize Kenny's not your guy, you don't invest too much into something money-wise with a free agent or draft-wise in a quarterback if you draft one after the 4th round, that it won't harm you too much in the future. That's the direction I kind of want them to go if you're the Steelers. Serious competition for Kenny Pickett, and just to get a better understanding of where the quarterbacks that you have on your roster are and what you can do moving forward. And finally, for the Dolphins, it's quite simple. I talked about them before and a little bit today. Re-sign your most important players in free agency and really going all in on this season, I believe, because after this season, you have a decision to make on Tua. Some other players might not be there, just depending on who's a free agent next offseason and who you get a deal done with this season. It might not be a long-term deal because they are over the cap, like I mentioned, $51 million over the cap or something like that. I think they're more of in a win-now situation with Tua under a manageable contract than they would be potentially paying Tua. I don't believe that the Dolphins will pay him that much money. I actually don't think many teams will pay him more than probably 35 max, in my opinion, per year. But that just also has to do with the injuries and, lack of success in the later months. But you never know on the other side. But that's just where I'm at. If they go all in this season, which is what I believe they should do, I think it'll just not only give them a better idea of what they need to do going forward after that, but if you go all in, do everything you can this season to make sure Tua can be as successful as possible. And if it doesn't work out, then you can make that decision to get rid of him, bring in some other different players that you are willing to lose in next year's free agency, now that you know that Tua is not your guy or that you need to go in a different direction. Those are the other 6 teams that made it into the AFC, and what I believe they should do to take that step forward and improve and just build a better organization, better system for them in the future, and not make a harsh, rash move to mess it all up now and pay for it later. But that's all the time I have for you guys today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this live show of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your engagement and reactions and everything means a lot to us and to me, so please remember to subscribe, like, and comment on the show, as well as following us on our other media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, for more of this sort of sports content and just other topics other than sports as well. Please, I want to remind you guys again to join me again tomorrow for more discussion and storylines around the NFL and just football in general. But for now, I've been your host, Manny Maradiaga, wishing you a good afternoon and hoping that you guys will all join me again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.